Welcome back everyone, I'm Setharoth, and today we are diving into an exciting new video design. I've been doing a lot of deep dive videos in the past, but this is the first time that I've built a build video around a specific mod. So some of you in my comments have asked about some SACROSANCT builds that you can design to take best advantage of the various perks and ranks and powers that you get as a SACROSANCT vampire. So as you can tell, I am currently in the ebony armor, so today we're going to be diving into the fighter build. I'm a big fan of hitting the easiest ones first, and given that the fighter is more straightforward than the thief or the mage, this seemed like the way to go. So first off, if you are a fighter, your primary concern as a vampire is how are you going to feed, particularly since you don't have a lot of stealth. So in that case, your bread and butter is the Vampire's Seduction power. Alright, this works on single target NPCs, and I'm going to go into first person just to make sure I don't miss for this demo. But your primary concern here is making sure there are no witnesses, at least witnesses that aren't your followers. Because if people see you feeding, they tend to take that personally.
Hey,
we're going to borrow Egnar here for a moment. And have a little feed. Here we go. So, as a fighter vampire, this is your primary way of feeding. Also, if you memorize like the sleeping routes of certain NPCs, you could also pick locks and break in. But if you're, and then feed on them. But if you're doing an exclusive fighter-based build and you don't want to take time to pick locks, then this might be your best bet. Is have that one NPC that you know is generally alone that you stop by and feed on whenever appropriate. Now, as a fighter, this video was a little tricky to figure out because I do need to identify the various weapons and tactics that can be covered in a fighter build. So, for example, you could be using a two-handed weapon, you could be using a sword and shield, or you could even be dual-wielding and calling that, a fighter build. I don't know why I don't have... Oh, yeah, that one's not enchanted, so there we go. Alright, so what I'm about to show you is two different strategies that you can use through SACROSANCT that are particularly effective. And they can be used with most of those attack types that I showed you with very little variation. I think we'll go back down to the ice here, because this is a good demo. Alright, so first off, we are going to, let's see, so for this first demonstration, let's go ahead and take some potions of thirst. I'm going to drive us right down to our most intense. We're going to go straight into Bloodstarved, because I want to show you guys all of the abilities around which this fighter build is designed. So, when you are a Bloodstarved vampire in SACROSANCT, you get an ability called Flaywind. The target person within 10 feet flees while vampire bats absorb health for 60 seconds. If the target dies, this counts as feeding. So give me a moment and we'll conjure up a demo. Oh no, I'm under attack. Oh man, this poor soul has iron armor. That's not gonna do much good. And Flaywind. Alright, so once again, this is only available when you are Bloodstarved. As you can tell, I've got two different modes that I want to show you guys. And the first is that you create a character that is always blood-starved. You're always super hungry for blood because it brings out abilities such as Flaywind and other powers that augment your physical destructive abilities. Okay. Next we have Vampiric Drain. This is another one that you can actually use alongside a shield. So you almost like a defensive spellcaster approach. Let's bring up another subject. Where are you? Ah, here we are. Alright, so this way you can keep your shield up, take the most advantage of that. But you can use that Vampiric Drain. There are a number of ways, if you're using mods from NI Sidon, such as Ordinator and Andromeda, there are ways to make novice level spells free to cast. Now I know this doesn't look like much, and that's because I recently fed, right? So Vampiric Drain does a quarter as much damage when you have recently fed. When you are blood starved, it does, with the right perks at least, it does a lot more damage. And I have shown that in various other demos. I just don't know. I will demonstrate that a little later. We're just going to get rid of the bodies here because, frankly, at this demo, there are going to be a lot of bodies. There are lots of ways you can tear up bad guys as a Sacrosanct Vampire. Oh, that is water. Oh, perfect. Yeah, you can just stay right in there then. Perfect. Alright, so next is Wassil. So for Wassil, we're going to, well, we're going to get thirsty. Alright, Wassil is a type of combat. There's actually another ability that I can use to activate it. There it is, Blood Revel. So this gives you bonuses to damage and spell effectiveness, but it also activates Wassil. So I want to activate it outside of combat first so you can see what we're looking at here. Power must be used in combat. Alright, never mind. We're going to go ahead and do that.
Don't know what that was, but don't try it again.
Well, it was me.
What was that?
There we go. Alright, so Wassil has activated. Now if you notice, my health bar is slowly dropping. You will see more health dropping than what I have because I have a lot of health. But now that I activate, see the difference? When you are blood starved with the right perks and you use Vampiric Drain, it's not even, it's ungodly. Technically your Vampiric Drain is destruction magic, so you want to keep that in mind, but it depends on what kind of a vampire you're building, right? If you want to use, you get the perks to increase Vampiric Drain power so that if you're in a bind or when you're doing this kind of a build where you are super hungry, you are blood starved, there's a number of debuffs that you have to keep in mind. The biggest one is Mockery of Life. Vampiric Drain is basically your only way to heal until you feed on another mortal. Like even the potions of blood won't help you to feed. You have to feed on a mortal before you can, in order to undo being blood starved. Which is tricky because when you're blood starved, NPCs will all attack you unless you have the right perks. So for an early build, if you're blood starved, you're basically everything in their mother will try to kill you if you're not careful. That also has the beast. You can only drain, you can't feed. Anyone you feed on is going to die. And then, as you can see, I am blood starved because I've descended to that level of thirst. There we are. Here's Wassil. So here's the details. When you're below 25% health in combat, or you use Blood Revel, because that also activates Wassil, it drains health, stamina, and magicka during combat and reduces them all by 10 points until you feed. So as you can see, once combat ended, Wassil ended, but I still have those debuffs until I feed on a target. Which brings us to our first point of operating as a fighter. So there's another way to feed. You have to get the right vampire ranks. So after you've been a vampire for, I think, 7 days, you get the first rank. And let me bring in a victim. Alright, so I'm using the Wildcat mod, but there's also an Ordinator perk that triggers these timed blocks. So when you bring up your shield within 1 second of being attacked. Come on. Can't quite time this right. Oh, I think this guy might have a perk that prevents that from proccing. There we go. Alright, so I've staggered him by countering with the shield, and now I'm able to combat drain. Now, usually this would be a feed that wouldn't kill them, but because I'm blood starved, it will be lethal. But this is another way that as a higher level fighter vampire, you can feed without requiring stealth or magic. Yeah, I do love that. That is so primal. Yeah, you just drain them dry. And goodbye, sir. We're just going to dispose of the body. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of NPCs lying around. Come on. There we go. Into the drink with you. Alright, I'll take what I can get. Alright. So once again, this is one of the reasons why Sword and Shield builds for a Skyrim playthrough, or a Sacrosanct playthrough, would work particularly well. Because you can use those timed blocks to stagger the opponent. and that enables you to feed. Another option, obviously, is just using Fusroda. So basically any build has that option as well. But again, early game, that won't be an option because you got to go through some of the main quest line before you can actually use that. Let's see. So we're going to go back up to being fully fed. I think, yeah, we should be good. Yep, Vampiric Charm returns as you feed. Okay. So next ability I want to show you guys, this is Blood Cauldron. So the other way that you can run this... Oh, before I finish talking about different weapons, obviously with a great sword, you can also do that same block maneuver, which forces the enemy to be staggered, which allows you to feed. So the only difficulty you're going to have with combat feeding is if you are a vanilla two-handed fighter, because they don't block, right? You'll have to use Fusroda in order to feed. Or I'll forget that I have Blood Revel on and accidentally turn on something else. Or I think that might have been Blood Cauldron. Yep, it was. Oops. Okay, so yeah, so keep that in mind. If you're going to be doing a dual-wielding fighter type build, you're better off relying on your Unrelenting Force to create that stagger effect so that you can get in and feed on a target. But if you're doing a two-handed or a sword and shield type build, you will be able to trigger that stagger effect, which allows you to feed during combat. If you're going to pick for your race of a vampire, Orc is probably my first choice for fighter. If you're using Sacrosanct and you combat feed as an Orc, you get 50 additional points of stamina for, I think it's a straight minute. So as long as you're like combat feeding every couple of victims, you'll have more stamina to swing around, which I think works out quite well. There's also, if you're using the Imperious mod, there's a number of other combat-oriented abilities that pop up that are really nice. But that is a conversation for another video. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and feed real quick so I can show you guys Blood Cauldron again. So Blood Cauldron can only be used when you are fully sated, right? So once you've recently fed, you're fully sated, you can activate Blood Cauldron. It's an emergency heal. Right? It gives you health, magic, and stamina, but it does bring you back down to being, I believe it's thirsty. There is a perk, however. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I have a checklist here of the different abilities that I want to walk through with you guys. Yeah, so that was Blood Cauldron. We already saw Blood Revel. That gives you more damage, but activates Wassil. And I've showed you Blood Starved. So next we're going to talk about rank powers. You'll notice when I check out my vampire stat, it's actually given me as a fraction, right? I have a certain amount of points. As you can see, I've got 1500 out of 1560. I'm almost to the last rank of Vampire. I had to dial back this character to pre-other videos of Sacrosanct, so that's why his stats are a little lower than they were before. But basically, every time you level up, every time you reach that number on the right, you will be able to unlock a vampire power or ability based on your vampire rank. And we might as well jump to the first of those, which is called Blood Knight. Blood Knight, I have so many buffs. This is what you get from modding a high-level playthrough. So Blood Knight also allows you to feed on staggered enemies. The 40 points of stamina, 50 points, there you go, yeah. Feed on stamina, yeah, that looks good. So that, you'll probably want to get that early on so that you can feed easily, like consistently throughout Skyrim. That's one of the first ranks I go for, is something that enhances my feeding, because when you're blood starved and you don't want to be, or you're blood starved and you don't have the right perks yet, that can really be detrimental to your gameplay. Next, I highly recommend Cauldron of Fire. So remember, when you've recently fed, you can activate Blood Cauldron, which is an emergency heal, but it makes you thirstier. If you add on Cauldron of Fire, you also get double attack damage, and you take half damage for 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. So first off, I'm going to bring up I'll just bring up a couple guys. Alright, so keep an eye on my damage before I use Blood Cauldron. Alright, so the fight's not going too good. I've already lost quite a bit of health. And we go Blood Cauldron. I got my heal. Now this guy's almost dead. Now he is dead. And that's another perk that, yeah, happens when I almost die. Sorry. That I've unlocked all of Sacrosanct, so that was not part of the demo. But as you can tell, I lasted a lot longer and did a lot more damage after using Blood Cauldron. What just happened? Oh, I think my undead mod. Yeah, my undead mod procced. Alright, so here's a taste of undeath. You don't necessarily die, you just teleport back to your lair. I forgot about that. That's cool. Alright, give me it. Well, actually, this is not a bad place to continue the demo, now that I think about it. Alright, well, cool. So, that was an unplanned for demonstration. Alright, moving on. Let's go ahead and, you know what, I think I will activate Immortality mode. Alright, so the next ability I want to show you is another, you unlock this as a vampire rank. It's called Dance with the Beast. Attack damage dealt is doubled, and attack damage taken is halved while affected by Wassil. Now remember, if you use Blood Revel, you can trigger Wassil, and Blood Revel gives you another 25% attack damage and spell effectiveness. So we're stacking on basically every rank, perk, and ability that enhances your attack damage or reduces your incoming damage. And the result at the end of the day is a freaking living tank. It's going to be fun. Next, the last of the vampire ranks, there's like 13 different vampire ranks to choose from, but these are the 4 that particularly benefit a fighter build. The last one is King Among Kine. You no longer lose any powers when feeding. There are 4 different levels of thirst as a vampire, and there are different powers for each one. When you have King Among Kine, you lose less of them along the way, so you can be, you know, parched or thirsty and still have some powers available that would not have been available otherwise. So that's just something to keep in mind. As far as potions go, obviously we're going to be using both potions of thirst and potions of, well, not so much potions of blood, because you can combat feed, so you really don't need potions of blood. But thirst you might need to if you're trying to drop yourself intentionally down to blood starved in order to maximize your perks and your damage. Alright, so those are the 4 ranks that you want to keep in mind for a fighter-based Sacrosanct build. Next, I want to look at the buffs you get from quests. There are 3 in particular, all of which come from the Blue Blood quest line. So remember, this is hunting down the most powerful people in Skyrim and feeding on them. The first one that you want to get from the Blue Blood quest line is Potence, right? So your Vampiric Strength gives you more attack damage. This one actually gives you more damage when you are fully fed. So if you're doing a build that's based on being blood starved, this won't help you as much, but because you have so many other perks that help you when you're blood starved, it still helps, just not as much as it would if you were fully fed. Next we have Tooth and Claw. So if you want to take this to the very next level and do a purely melee build, this kind of makes me think of that. Alright, so your attacks deal 25% more damage to targets affected by a hemomancy spell such as Blood Seed. This is another option that you can use if you're really trying to maximize your physical damage output. You can do a little bit of hemomancy, but think of it as a debuff, right? So you're not necessarily trying to make a destruction wizard, you're just grabbing the first, like you literally just drain 2 or 3 people and you'll get the first blood magic spell. And you're not really using it to inflict a lot of damage, you're using it to give yourself that 25% higher damage output. So that's another option that you can take with your build. It just will probably deny you a shield, because at that point you'd need spell in one hand, sword in the other, and if you're doing Wildcat, melee and shield can be tricky. But if you have Unrelenting Force to do the staggering, then you'd probably be okay. And last for this is the last of the buffs that you get from the Blue Blood quest line. It is Masquerade. You are no longer hated and feared when blood starved. I believe this will require you to finish the Blue Blood quest line. It's the very last buff in the Blue Blood quest line. So you'll need to feed on, I think it's 7 high-powered NPCs. But the perk is you can actually run an entire playthrough as blood starved. Like, without any consequences of bad guys trying to kill you, or NPCs in particular trying to kill you when they first see you. So let's see, that covers our quest buffs, potions. All right, now next we're gonna hop over to Vampire Lord. You won't, if you're doing a pure fighting melee build, I'm not going to go into a pure fighting melee Vampire Lord because I've already done that in a previous video. But I do want to highlight the perks that you unlock as a Vampire Lord, which most greatly benefit a fighter build in their mortal form, right? I feel like the Vampire Lord is pretty straightforward as far as enhancing melee versus magic. Alright, so the first of these is Unearthly. Well, obviously the first of these is Power is Power. It just raises all your stats, but only as a Vampire Lord. So if we're strictly looking for perks that enhance your mortal form, this is where we work. The first is Unearthly Will. Now this does affect a lot of your spells, but the key is it also affects your Vampiric Drain in mortal form, so that your Vampiric Drain costs 50% less. So even if you don't have a lot of magicka, and you don't have perks that make your novice level spells free, you can still make it cheap enough to function as an emergency heal. And there are other perks that further enhance your Vampiric Drain, so you'll want to, we'll want to keep those in mind. Another perk that I highly recommend is Exsanguinate. Your Vampiric Drain spell in mortal form deals 50% more damage when fighting only one enemy, and can be dual cast for a chance to stagger enemies. Now remember, when they are staggered, you can also combat feed. So with this perk, you won't even have to worry about timed builds, or think of it more as an emergency. Oh crap, I'm low on health, I bit off more than I can chew. You can switch into dual casting Vampiric Drain just to give you an emergency heal, possibly stagger an opponent and give you time to reset. Alright, so the last perk I recommend for a mortal form fighting build is Celerity. You're able to move at unnatural speed. Your mortal form is 10% faster. So obviously speed is more for a mage or thief playthrough, or you're trying to get away or stay away. But being able to move quickly also allows you to dodge incoming strikes, which also helps you're a heavy hitter, particularly if you're taking on something like one of my modded giants and getting hit just isn't a good idea. Most of the perks that lead up to it are helpful to your melee vampire form, so you still kind of get that melee experience, but you do have to unlock a few more perks as a Vampire Lord before you can get to that Celerity bonus. But the other two, Exsanguinate and Unearthly will just require 3 Vampire Lord perks. So if you're really wanting to do a mortal form fighter playthrough, you really only need, these two they're basically to enhance your Vampiric Drain. So technically, if you're not focused on Vampiric Drain at all and just staying sated and using the perks that boost that approach, then you wouldn't even need the Vampire Lord perks at all. You could technically just ignore the Vampire Lord entirely if you wanted to, because if you were just going for a pure melee sword and board type build. If you want to incorporate Vampire Lord into it more power to you. A Fusro Da and changing while they're all tumbled around on top of each other, nothing wrong with that. Oh, I seem to have missed one. Oops, back to the Vampiric Lord I go. Wait, where'd you go? There we are. Alright, I missed a perk. Give me a sec. Alright, I thought I was missing something that actually helped. The 3 perks didn't seem quite right. So the 4th one is Embrace the Beast. You're stronger when blood-starved. This is where that blood-starved build can really come into play. You deal 25% more attack damage. Flaywind lasts 100% longer. Vampiric Drain deals 50% more damage, and you have a 15% chance to cast Flaywind on humanoid targets for 5 points of magic damage for 10 seconds. So if you're wanting to do a blood-starved build, the very first place you want to go is Embrace the Beast. Because, oh yes, feeding on victims also depletes, Psychic Vampire kind of helps because it depletes their stamina. So while you're feeding on someone, you're basically not only gaining stamina yourself, but you're taking away theirs. I'm trying to ignore the other side effects that are more like spell-oriented. White Wolf is also helpful because it raises the level of NPC that you can successfully hit with Vampire's Seduction, and it allows you to drain people that are under the effects of Vampire's Seduction. So, that's helpful, but it's not necessarily what you want for a pure fighter build. If you want to mix in other stuff, go ahead. Quartz Shaft, this is where you can make potions of thirst and potions of healing, which are still very good. They allow you to control what level of thirst you're at, so that can allow you to more easily jump between being blood-starved and being like fully sated, depending on which perks you're trying to take advantage of. Alright, so let me just double check my list real quick. I believe that is everything. We have covered Vampire Seduction, Flaywind, Vampiric Drain, Wassil. Blood Cauldron and Blood Revel are your primary abilities for maximizing your physical damage, particularly if you have Cauldron of Fire. Blood Knight allows you to feed on staggered enemies. Dancing with the Beast gives you more damage when you're under Wassil. Yeah, I think we have covered everything. So those are all of the perks, ranks, and powers that are designed to enhance a melee-oriented vampiric build playthrough. I'm trying to get the cool little wraparound. There we go. Alright, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this video thus far. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments below which vampiric ability or power from SACROSANCT do you think makes the most sense for a fighter type build? Or were you rather hoping on a mage build or a thief build with SACROSANCT? Because those videos are coming soon. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Take care.